tonight on Hope Healing Lipstick by David Horne, who's a former makeup artist of 30 years. He's an art and design educator. He's also a cosmetic designer. He mentors and coaches makeup artists, and he happens to be one of the most supportive and unassuming people I've had the pleasure of knowing in this industry. And I say that with hand on heart, David. And I thought tonight it would be a really interesting conversation to have where we can discuss art, creativity, and healing. And I think I've been sort of well aware for some years about the healing power of creativity. And I thought, you being someone who is hugely creative, probably one of the most creative people I know, but you also possess the ability to be very analytical and highly eloquent and articulate. And so I was really interested to talk to you about what you see as creativity, how art and creativity can help someone express themselves, heal from, say, loss, from emotional distress or discomfort, and really what your views are on that. So if you could speak to a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the things is being a makeup artist is we both have had an early former career as makeup artists, and then both of us, I think it's relevant, one of the things we share is we've kind of made that pivot, which a lot of people still have yet to face. And I think we're early adopters of that. We decided that makeup artistry had changed and is changing and is a new generation going forward. And I think that we both shared the viewpoint that it was time for us to bow out gracefully and look at other new avenues where we could bring expertise to the table. I think one of the key decision makers on that, for me speaking, for that aspect, was the fact that I felt the engagement had gone. Being an educator, I didn't feel the education engagement was the same, privately teaching or personal teaching. And I think creativity, there has to be some level of engagement. And I think that's not the fault of anybody. I think it's a social media platform generation, which is a scroll generation, isn't it? Which we don't represent. We've adopted it, but it's not our natural habitat. So the key thing is there's a little bit of like anesthetic that goes with that in terms of creativity, I think, because it's slightly numbing. I think in terms of the creative aspect, ever since I was way back to when I was probably 5, I had a very, very powerful creative force around me, and my mother, which I lost when I was in my early 20s. And I think that shapes quite a lot of things. You know, when you have a mentor that guides you, and this isn't like the classical kind of, in awe of the mother syndrome. This was literally a super creative, multitasking. I come from a working class background. I don't come from any privilege. I came from a very clear understanding that it was go out and work for yourself, hustle, graft, and earn your keep. I didn't have any privilege in any aspect of my career. And I think that when you see somebody around you at an early stage, formative years, and you see that multitasking, like for me, my mum was staying at home, she was painting, she made soft furnishing, she made us actually stuff our teddy bears. I mean, there's a domineering mother character over you, like, you will stuff your teddy bear, you will make your own toy and appreciate it. But I really value those now that I'm an adult and, in my older midlife, I really value looking back retrospectively at the fact that I stuffed my own teddy bear. I think there's a great metaphor of life about putting the effort in and putting the graft in. And I learned that from a very early age. I mean, having a bereavement so early in my early 20s, it really does catapult you, and you have to rely on things which are going to elevate your ability to really grasp onto something to propel you forward. And I think probably it was creativity, Lee. I think that probably was the firework that was lit in that bereavement experience, which is not unique to me. Many people have early parental bereavement, but I definitely look retrospectively and think lit a fuse of me against the world, off I go. And ironically, and I think you probably even know this, the next day after I'd found out the bereavement, I'd lost my mum, I actually did a multilingual interview to go international for Mac. And I got the job in the 90s to go and launch Mac in Europe. And it was actually during the bereavement that I took the second language course. So there is that capacity, even in great bereavement, to really forge, paths. And I think that's something I've always tried to add to people that I mentor, and to try and make that eloquent for them, that they can actually see that you can multitask and you can actually overcome great obstacles and achieve great things if you put some determination. I mean, I'm quite stoic on that. I like determination in people I mentor. And if they don't engage, I do find that I switch off. People I've mentored will be very easily recognizing that. I'm a tough love type of coach. I don't like soft coaching. I like people to get results for themselves and see the ceiling, smash the ceiling, and achieve the possible. I believe in glass ceilings, smashing through and going up. And I think people I've mentored can relate to that, because a lot of people I've mentored have gone on to great things, and that's through their determination. But maybe I just was a catalyst in some way.
Do you think, David, that early formative experience with your bereavement, then, do you think that really helped you hone what creativity was to you? And did it sort of almost deposit this more stoicism and more sort of resilience in the face of that adversity at that young age?
It definitely placed me on a mountain. I wasn't ready to accept a bereavement in my early 20s. I didn't think it was fair, like most people going through a young bereavement. Why now? Why the person that shapes me? Why the mentor? And definitely over the next decades, the mentor I needed wasn't there. You know, so that probably catapulted me to become the mentor for so many, because my mentor was removed and I didn't have that. So maybe there was a sort of replacement therapy in that aspect. And definitely I feel like mentoring others gave me great comfort, because it was very tragic that my mentor had been so cruelly taken. It was cancer. And essentially I wasn't accepting of that for many, many years, but it propelled me. And I sought solace in, you know, traveling the world as a makeup artist, you know, often on my own in many places, as every makeup artist listening to this can actually relate to. And, you know, in those moments you get a lot of reflection. And I think that my creativity and my spirituality definitely led me to the creative aspect of healing and recovery and actually making my way through those formative years. I think it was definitely based on spirituality.
Do you think that creativity is really helpful for people that maybe cannot articulate what it is that they are feeling, and that they don't have the words? It's almost is the unspoken word that is what we create with our, whether it be with our hands, or whether it's a painting or clay or makeup or whatever that expression might be, that is really telling the story of what a person is feeling when they can't find that those depth of words. Maybe words cheapen it or something.
I think that, you know, there's a place you have to find. For me, it's a 5-year-old with a big box of crayons. You know, my happy place is probably age 5 with 100 felt tips. That was probably the happiest I was in life, because of the possibilities and the potential and all the colors. And if you look at my career, which has gone on through so many different layers of color and mixology and evolved over the years, you know, the 100 felt tips rule is still there. That's still my fascination. I still can't use one felt tip. I want 100. And, you know, I think that expanded my thinking and my horizons. The thing I think with creativity, I think it's very much wrapped up in a lot of pretension, and I hate that about it. You know, one of the things I absolutely loathe is when you hear talks and like, oh, think outside of the box. You know, creatives would never have a box. There would never be a box. It's just the wrong analogy. If you're truly innately creative, there would be no box and confinement. You would be looking at things to build, or a box would be circular. There would just be not a square, rigid format. It doesn't equate. So when people say they're creative and then go on to equate that with big statements and pretension about artistic, you know, think outside of the box, I lose interest in honesty, because I just think you're not creative. You've learned this somewhere. It's a fridge magnet. You know, you're just reciting it like in your authentic voice, which you've read somewhere. And it's just very unconnecting to me. I think the thing that I feel, and I feel that when you take away the pretension and you just see creativity as just doing something different. I mean, my brain, Lee, you know me quite personally. My brain says most people clap, right, west to east. I clap north to south. I mean, I'm just weird. You know, like I will always find a way that you do something mundane differently. So instead of clapping, I'll suddenly think, what if I do that? And no one else does that, you know? And then suddenly I realized, who the hell claps north to south? The whole room's clapping west to east. So I think there's a kind of acceptance of that differentiation. And I think that's probably just formed over the years of a comfort to be different and an enjoyment of being different.
And is that also, do you think, part of the play aspect? Because, you know, when we're younger children, young children, we play. That's part of our development. That's part of the way we express ourselves. It's part of our learning process, is to play with things, to explore. Without those boundaries, you know.
I mean, when you look at great painters, if you look at great painters, and I use Matisse as an example, Henri Matisse was a great painter, but as he got older, he got more ailments. He wasn't able to do it. But the brilliant thing about a true artist is they adapt and they pivot and they change. And even when he couldn't see, he made blocks of color and stuck them on. I mean, I always use the analogy of the snail by Henri Matisse, because it's just literally a collage of blocks of color. He still had that excitement about color, even though he could hardly see. Could hardly even get out of his bed, but he still found a way to stick them on the wall and got somebody to make that happen. And I think there's a metaphor in life in that if you actually have an adversity or a differentiation or an obstacle, you know, many people I mentor be like, oh, there's a tree across the road, give up, die, I can't do it. And I'm like, move the bloody tree. What's the problem? There has to be a tree removal aspect to it. If you just say, oh, there's a tree across my path, I can't move forward, well, game over you. You know, you have to find another way of putting another coin in the slot and find another route. And I think that's where it challenges your creativity. If you keel over and die and just say, I can't do it, then, you know, that's not going to be the path you need, is it? You have to find a solution.
I often think with the amount of uncertainty that people have been grappling with, and we had conversations about this in Clubhouse, and this prolonged uncertainty about whether it's economic uncertainty, job uncertainty, just the world not knowing quite where we're headed.
Yeah.
That uncertainty, although it can be very hard on the nervous system, and it's also a space for creativity. Because although we don't know what is there, it's a space to create something for ourselves.
I mean, creativity is a drawer away in your house. I mean, there's no great expense in this. You don't have to go and make something. I mean, you can create anything. Remember, like, creativity to me, if somebody said to me, what's creativity? It's just doing something differently. It's just doing a process you always do somehow, just approach it differently. So change the time you eat your dinner is creative. It doesn't make a great investment. You've just been creative in that one move. It's just swerving the normality. You know, my whole life, as you know me, my whole life is swerving normality. You know, I never was a pronoun. I never will be a pronoun. I mean, I'm not any fluid. I'm probably running on embalming fluid, not gender fluid. I mean, the key thing here is, you know, I'm comfortable because over years I've evolved that into a place where I'm fine with that. And I think there's a moral in that. Stop trying to please everybody, people listening, you know, stop trying to appease everybody. I think if the pandemic's taught us anything, it's taught us that those that seek materialism are going to be disappointed. I've never really been driven by materialism. I mean, when I'm extinguished from the earth, I'll have nothing. I came in with nothing and I leave with nothing. I really carry a suitcase mentality, you know, a suitcase of air. I don't like materialistic things. Over the years, I've tried to declutter that and hold on to things which are more actually of the moment rather than just materialistic things. I've had materialistic things. I've had materialistic jobs. It's not interesting to me. Interestingly, as I've got older, it's become less and less about the climb and more about the slide and the deceleration and the demotion. I can't tell you how many times I've demoted myself. I mean, to the frustration of many of my bosses. They're like, will you stop demoting yourself? I'm like, I'm so over this. It's just such a push for what? Who really wins in this? It doesn't feed my spirit. It just depletes it. And yes, I could have a bag of gold, a bag of rubies and diamonds, but you know what? I can't take them anywhere into any realm. So they're of no value. And I think there's an aspect to that in everything I approach.
That's so interesting because I think it's always, you know, we live in this culture of celebrating our achievements the whole time, and to not be ambitious is almost like a sin. Do you know what I mean? For someone to say, actually, I don't want to do that. I want something that's different from that, you know, because there's such a sort of, you know, focus on the edited highlights and how things look rather than necessarily how things are.
Well, I mean, it's a hand-down generation. You're taught that success looks like, you know, the promotion, the business card. I've broken every hub that's ever there. I was the first to link out of LinkedIn. No one links out. The whole thing is linking in. And I was like, I'm linking out. There's creativity. You know, I'm always the first to kind of escape any sort of like, you know, grappling. And any golden cage I find myself in, I quickly gnaw through the bars and fly. You know, like anything, there's no golden egg syndrome here. I mean, I've worked for people that have tried to capture me as a golden egg, and I immediately demote myself, paint myself blue, refuse to be gold, and just crack myself. So there's no capture element in that. And I think there's the creativity. But I think the key thing is definitely as you get older, you know, I'm in my early 50s. When you're in your 20s, it's all about the acceleration, the climb. I must be wise. I must be successful. That's what I've been programmed to believe. In your 30s, you get the starting point of, okay, I'm maturing, I'm becoming wiser, I'm becoming a little bit more comfortable, but maybe a little bit wrinkled. I don't care, and then you go into that level of, do I feel comfort with this, or do I stop time? It's heartbreaking to me when I deal with lots of people in the beauty industry who have frozen time, because I feel like, just accept yourself. It's just a never ending battle. You're going to age. I mean, how many times I say we are perishable fruit. You cannot freeze the fruit. You don't want to be a frozen pea. It's not about the way you should live. You should accept the thawing, and you should accept the actual rotting, and accept the degeneration. Because if you make peace with that, the vanity aspect is going to go of beauty. Beauty is not about those things. As a makeup artist, that was what always intrigued me. It was making people's self-esteem more heightened. It was never the vanity. It was never the painting. That would have got very boring. I wouldn't have done makeup for over 30 years if I was just painting faces and making everybody pretty. I would have got dull of that in 2 weeks, which I generally did. So I had to reinvent my interest, as you did, and have to find the new things. And self-esteem through makeup artistry and through your hands and brushes is something that you don't become former. I'm comfortable being a former makeup artist. When people say, oh, you're a makeup artist, I'm like, I'm not a makeup artist. I was passionate about that in the 90s. It's 2022. I'm not the same onion. I've got many, many more layers now, that have grown over the years. I'm a village fair onion now with much more substance. And I think, it's at my heart. I still love beauty. I went to a beauty event this week, but my passion is not there. My passion has moved on to holistic things. It's not about the vanity of makeup.
How do you think people can hone creativity? How would you say, if someone feels they're not a creative person? I think that, and I know this is something I've struggled with myself, that when I was doing a lot of makeup, I didn't ever feel that I was particularly creative, and I felt like I was trying to be creative.
Lee,
I couldn't get access to it.
Pretty much top 10 makeup artists in the world, and some of those have got huge imposter syndrome and feel that they're not creative. They read every book, they listen to every TED talk, they try and be creative in every aspect they do. They just don't believe their creativity, and that's the block. The key thing is, if you start blocking yourself that, I've got to watch things and become creative, I must be more creative, is the most damaging sentence you could ever say to a creative, because you've got to let it become fluid. I think the key thing is to take away the pretension of creativity. Stop trying to read, Edward de Bono books about hats and creativity and all the things you feel like you're obliged to read to become creative, and just literally stop all of that nonsense. He said in a very matronly way, stop that nonsense
now.
And I'll call it the take a Matisse moment. It's just break things down into blocks and colors and stick them on the wall. I mean, in my private life, I teach people to make quiches and tarts. This is something I do.
The art of tart.
The art of tart, because essentially my color wheel now is edible. I'm now eating the evidence. I've made it, I've created it, I've developed it, I've made cosmetics out of the color wheel, and now I'm eating it. I mean, every level of creativity. And you know what? What I get from that, which is so rewarding, is somebody having a mindful conversation in their kitchen. We discuss life, we discuss beauty, we edit their makeup bag, and actually they make something. And you know what's rewarding about it? It's the fact that they make something at the end that they take away the pride in. The tart is a metaphor, isn't it? It's a creative artwork, and they get all the mindfulness in being able to create that with color and then eat it. So essentially it's teaching creative habits. And what's lovely is after I've done the class, because it's an hour, I get little messages. I'm out and about, and I suddenly get a message of a quiche pops up on my phone. It's like, I've made this one, look. And I'm like the proud mother. I'm like, that's so good. Now make the tree of life. And they're like, how do you do that? I'm like, I'm not telling you. Go work it out. Twist some pastry, make a tree, have a go. Tell me what you come up with. And then about 2 days later, I get this amazing tree pie. It comes up on my phone. I'm like, you did it. Now put it through the seasons and it evolves. Let the leaves fall off and they make another one. But yeah, it's about what's around you.
Do you think that because of the fact that I think sometimes people think that creativity comes with accomplishment and that you have to accomplish something out of creativity, it becomes based on more performance, whereas I think that that's, when you come in from that angle,
I mean, what are the goals? Are you going to win a prize? Are you going to get a badge? Are you going to get like a gymkhana or a rosette because you came first? I mean, when you take away the competitive nature
yes,
I think that's where the creativity lives. Like we're both old enough and wise enough in this industry to know that, is it really a fair industry? It's probably more ephemeral. There's probably prizes for people that shouldn't get prizes, and there's probably top artists that are not top artists. The key
Yeah.
thing is you've got to elect to be your best version of you, which sounds
Yeah.
cliche, but I do think it's true. All you've
Mm.
got to please in your lifetime is yourself. And I'm always saying to people I mentor, it's the power of no. It's actually being able to say no to things is just as empowering as saying yes to things you
Mm.
hate.
Mm.
When I learned that,
Mm.
probably in my 30s, I learned that lesson quite early. That's the
Mm.
stoic part of my hermetic kind of personality. I was like, you know what? I'm going to stop saying yes to everybody. And if
Mm.
they don't like that, that's
Mm.
their problem and their bad luck.
Mm.
And they don't like it. And sometimes they get really angry because I decline things or turn down things, or somebody wants me to consult and I'm not interested in the consulting, I decline it.
Mm.
And they're
Mm.
very insulted by that and very enraged. But the key thing is, I'm not the person they need. They actually need themselves to do those things. Essentially, I'm demoting myself. So I remove myself from their needs. And actually, that's where the self-esteem actually is protected, isn't it? Because the mindfulness is actually accepting what you want to do and not continually pleasing everybody as we've been taught to do from child to 20s.
Yeah, and that's that thing of buying into how something looks again, isn't it? So
Yeah, I mean, I love getting older. The
Mm.
older you get, the more wise you get, and the more
Mm.
comfortable you get with the power of no. And I
Mm.
think that's
Mm.
where the creativity comes from, is the self-esteem is protected by continuing to please yourself.
Mm.
That's truly the essence of self-love, isn't it? Pleasing yourself, because you're not taught that that's a positive thing. You're taught you should never be selfish and please yourself. And it's
Mm.
altruistic, because when you switch that and think, well, if I please myself, I'm better to please others,
Mm.
then
Mm.
essentially you're the best version of yourself to be
Mm.
available. And
Mm.
then you're giving yourself more freely and unconditionally. And I
Mm.
think that aspect is what's valuable in what you do. I mean, I'm so proud to know you because I think you were one of the key people that pivoted from this makeup artist pot. We
Mm.
were all 90s makeup artists, successful
Mm.
in the 90s. Hurrah. Well done us. Everybody that's listening that was in the 90s doing makeup. Hurrah. We know you. But the key
Yes.
thing is, the pivot is more interesting. It's the new
Mm.
design, it's the new blueprint, and it's like
Mm.
that's the test. Everything you learned in the 90s is now coming
Mm.
to fruition of how do you change yourself? How do you accept
Mm.
yourself? How do you
Mm.
move yourself up a staircase you've never walked before? How do you glide? All of that is
Mm.
important.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's also sort of latches onto the identity one has for how they see themselves and how they think other people might see them and how they want to be seen. And I think the
Yeah,
creative part of finding creative ways to think about that, finding
yeah.
creative ways to pivot, and having the sort of imagination to use your imagination in a way that is helpful to see yourself, that future you. Well, how will that look, and how do I want it to look, and how will I know I've started to sort of walk that path?
There's a
What do
lot
I
of
want it to
bravery,
feel
isn't
like?
there? And there's
Mm,
so much bravery in revealing yourself. Much
mm,
of the stuff we do as a makeup artist is trying to get people to be comfortable to cover themselves.
mm,
How many conversations in the years of makeup have you had about, oh, I can't go with that little foundation, or I need more concealer, or and you
mm,
just feel like heartbroken.
mm,
You're like, take it
mm,
all away. When
mm,
you can take it all away, you've really, really fulfilled your legacy. And
mm,
as you get older, I do think that confidence comes to
mm,
literally strip back some of that veneer, strip back some of those layers and become more diaphanous and transparent and allow
mm,
yourself to show. And I think there's the liberation in middle age, is
mm,
the fact that it's okay to show and you've still got another half of your life left. So
mm,
get over it and get
mm,
on with it and then
mm,
celebrate it and do those creative things. And you know what? Creativity for me is about mistakes. It's about who
mm,
knows?
mm,
I started making candles. I'd never made a candle. The first
mm.
one looked like clotted cheese. It was awful. And then eventually you just get
I
better at it.
remember.
You
I
just get a bit
remember.
better at it. And then suddenly you find yourself mastering it because you put the effort in. So, like
Mm,
anything, E is for effort.
mm,
No effort, no engagement, you may as well give up. Those are the two big words, aren't they? You've got to put the effort in and you've got to engage, but don't
mm,
find creativity pretentious. Just if there's ever a place that I would want to actually be involved in, it's a black cafe, which is painted black inside and everything's colorful. So, if I ever do another business, it would literally be a nutrition based business and it would be
yeah.
my kitchen to the public to have creative, mindful talks. And it would
Mm,
be a witch's meeting point and it
I
would be
love
a
it.
magical place
Mm,
and probably wouldn't let anyone in and demote everybody and everybody be fired. But the key thing is it would be a melting pot, like a crucible of creativity. And yeah, I
mm,
think it maybe, I'm taking some time off demoting myself from, I love the fact I can disappear for a few years, but when I put my mind back to, being around the people and serving people and being servitude again,
mm,
then essentially I think an outlet like that, a cafe of some description
mm, mm,
would be
mm,
amazing. Probably not me doing it better. but I've definitely got, opinions of how that could work creatively and colorfully. I think, what we're saying is creativity is very, very healing, isn't it? And you've just got to not be afraid of it. You've got to find the creativity. I mean, take that analogy of the Matisse, in ailment and failing health, he still found a way to make those pictures and find color. And I think that's the analogy of the conversation, really, isn't it?
Totally.
To find the creativity in everyday things.
And I think that when you go in with low stakes, whether it's not based on performance, it's based on creativity and fun and play, then it
use
goes,
the idea. I mean, if we were an onion, think about collecting the layers. The beauty of the best onion has the most layers, right? So all the mistakes are hidden eventually. You just learn and move on and add another layer. And eventually that's what you see as your wisdom, isn't it? It's that fruit of all the years that you've actually tried things. And to anyone listening, just try. And if you just fail, who cares? I mean, I've done things and failed. I've done things and won. I mean, that's the joy, isn't it? You've got to know the difference between what failure is and what success is. You can't appreciate success if you haven't had failure. It just isn't going to give you an analogy to understand.
100%. David, thank you for your time.
Pleasure always. I love spending time with you. You are a wise owl.